Hello students and welcome to this explanation of the group assignment on cash flow. I want us to read the questions together and then I'm going to explain the way that this question should have been answered. The question says, Mr. Sibanda started a new business on 4 January with 80,000 Rand cash. He manufactures a product which there is already an existing market for. He found a suitable premises and the rent is 5,000 Rand per month. And then he bought second-hand machinery with 60,000, and from this 80,000 Rand capital that he started to use his business, or to start, he used to start his business. In note number 1, it says that production starts on 4 January, and 25% of the following month's sales is manufactured. Every month thereafter, the production will consist of 75% of the current month's sales and 25% of the following month's sales, and they've given you the sales units as well as the sales Rand values. So we can already do that calculation because that is then a production unit calculation that needs to be done. And if you just look at the next note, you will see that the production units are quite important because they've given you the variable production cost per unit, and therefore you need to know the production units in order to be able to use the 7 Rand, the 6 Rand, and the 2 Rand respectively. Alrighty. So if we do a calculation for the production units, I just quickly drafted the basic layout of my cash budget, and then I'm going to have a number of support calculations. So we have January, we have February, we have March, and I'm going to start with production. And we need to first go and find the sales units. So the sales units were given to us as January, we don't have anything. In February, 3,200. In March, there was 3,600. Then in April, there was 4,000. And I'm just also going to put May. I just want to make sure that there's no information left out that we need to use. So those are the sales units. And now we need to go and look at what we produce. So in January, it is stated that we make 25% of the next month. So it will be the 3,200 of February times 25%. Then in February, because they say for every month thereafter, it is 75% of the current month and 25% of the next month. So it will be then 3,200, 75% of the current month, which is February. And then the next month is 3,600 of March times 25%. Then for March, it's going to be of the current month, 3,600 units that we sell times 0.75. And then the next month is April, so it will be 4,000 at 25%. And for April, we're going to say it is for 4,000 of the 4,000, it is 75% for the current month. And then the next month is also 4,000 units in May, and that will be 25%. All right, I'm just going to get the sum total of everything. And then we have our production units. So for the produce, it's going to be the sum total of those. And I'm just copying my formula. So here we have our units that we need to produce. Right. If we continue to read the question, they say in note number 4 that raw material inventory costing 10,000 Rand was purchased in cash from the 80,000. So the 80,000 was referred to into the introductory paragraph. So I'm going to go to my cash flow budget, or my cash budget so long, and I'm just going to say under the opening cash that we started this business with was 80,000. Under payments, there were some machines that we purchased. Second hand, it was 60,000. And then obviously we now have some inventory that we purchased. and that was 10,000 Rand in cash. They've also given us in the introductory paragraph the rental, so I'm also going to put that up. They say it's 5,000 Rand per month. It's always nice to so long just fill out, the amounts that are quite simple. Then you know that you already have scored some marks. If I now look at the raw material rule for credit purchases, they say the material credit purchases for the current month is based on 50% of the next month's production, and payments are made to creditors 1 month after. So we need to go and see now then in our support calcs what the material actually is worth. So I'm just going to start with my production, and we've already calculated that now. And please note that for January, this 800 units will not be on credit because it was paid for in cash with this 10,000 Rand that we spent there. So credit purchases will only start as from February. So for February, we're going to say what was the cost per production unit, and it's given to us as 7 Rand. And if I do that calculation, I get to the units times the Rand value. And that gives me 23,100, 25,900, and 28,000 Rand respectively. So then we need to go and see. So this is the material, the purchases, the credit purchases. But they also give us a rule for the purchase, the credit payments. And they say in this question that 50%, the material purchases is 50% of the next month's production, and payments are made to creditors 1 month after. Right, so we need to go and see then to buy. The rule is that you buy 50% of the next month. Just again, look at the sentence. It's 50% of the next month's production. So in January, we will have to buy 50% of February. And in February, we will buy 50% of March. And in March, we will buy 50% of April. Then we need to go and see when the payments are actually due. So the credit payments take place according to this question. Payments are made to creditors 1 month after the purchase. So we bought in January, we bought at 11,550, but we only pay for it 1 month later in February. And then in March, we only pay February, and then in April, we only pay for March. So our payments are then the 11,550, 12,950, and the 14,000. So I'm going to go back to my layout and I'm going to fill it in. So I'm going to say credit payments to creditors. So in January, there was nothing. In February, I believe it was 11,550 that had to be paid. And in March, it was 12,950 that had to be paid. Right, so we've done our material. If I look at the next note, it relates to the wages of the workers. And they say in note number 3 that it is 6 Rand per production unit. So again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a calculation for labor. And for the labor, we have again Jan, Feb, March. And I'm going to start with my production units again. And that was 800 for February. The production units were 3,300. For March, they were 3,700. They say that the cost for labor is a 6 Rand per unit. So it's going to be 6, 6, 6. And I'm going to do multiplication there as well. And then we are able to calculate our labor cost. However, they say that it's only paid in the next month because it is paid on the 7th of the next month. So in December, you would agree with me that there would have been no wages because we didn't have a business. The business only started on 4 January. So on the 7th of January, we would have had no payments to make to laborers. On the 7th of February, we had to pay for January. And then on the 7th of March, we had to pay for February. So there we were able then to calculate our labor payments. So under payments, I'm going to say labor cost. And that was then 0. And in Feb, it was 4,800 and then 19,800 in March. Just want to highlight the months. Alrighty, so if I look at the next note, it relates to variable overhead and it says 60% is paid for in the month following the month it was incurred and 40% is paid for in the second month. So now I need to go and do some a calculation for variable overhead. Again, I need to start with my production units. Production, it was 800, 3,300, 3,700. Then we have to go and see what the costs are, and it seems like it's 2 Rand per unit. If I get an answer there, I have calculated then the variable overhead, but there's a specific way in which it is paid for. 60% is paid for in the month following the month, and 40% is paid for in the second month. So then I'm going to draw up a schedule. So I'm going to say we have January, February, and March. We're going to have Jan, Feb, and March. And then I'm going to have the Rand values. It's 1,600, 6,600, and 7,400. For January, we're going to say we pay in February and March. So it's the month following. And it seems like it's 60% in the month following. So it's going to be 1,600 times 60%. And in March, it's going to be 40%, so it's going to be 1,600 in the second month times 40%. For February, we're going to make payments only in March, so it's going to be 6,600 at 60% because that is the next month. So of course you can go and calculate April as well, but it is not required. So therefore, I'm just going to stop there and get the sum total of my collections. So this should be 960, and if I get to the sum of those two, it is 4,600 Rand. So I'm going to go back to my payments, and I'm going to say variable overhead. And that was then nothing in January. In February, we had 960, and in March, we had an amount of 4,600. Righty. If I go to the next note, it is my fixed overhead, and the fixed overhead is 4,000 Rand excluding the rent, but we have already accounted for the rent. If we can go back, payments, there's the rental, 5,000 Rand a month. They say the fixed overheads is 4,000 Rand per month. 1/4 is paid in the month that it is incurred, 1/2 in the following month, and the remainder is depreciation. So again, we need to go and do a support calc there. So we are on the fixed overhead. January, February, and March, and it is always 4,000 Rand, it seems to me. So 4,000, 4,000, 4,000. And just read carefully again. They say it is 1/4 is paid in the month that it is incurred, and then 1/2 in the other, and then the remainder is not cash flow. So for January, we're going to pay 1/2 in January, which should be 4,000, not 1/2, I beg your pardon. It should be 1/4, so that's 25%. And then 1/2 in February, which should be 4,000. 1/2 of 4,000 should be 2,000, and the rest we're going to ignore because the other 1,000 Rand is depreciation that we should not account for. In February, again, we're going to have 1,000, it's 1/4, and then for the next month we have 1/2, which is again 2,000. And in March we have then 1,000, and for April it will then be 2,000. I'll get the sum of all these amounts. So it's 1,000, 3,000, and 3,000. I'm going to go to my payments, say fixed overhead. It's 1,000, 3,000, and 3,000. We are on the final note, and the final note is all about the sales and the data collection. So all the sales are done on credit, and they say the amounts receivable is 5% discount is allowed if the payment is made by the debtor in the current month. So there's 20% of the sales that pay in the current month. Then they say 50% pays in the next month, and 20% in the third month, and 8% in the fourth month. So let's do that calculation. They've given us the sales in Rand terms. Right, so sales, we have January, February, and March. We have January, February, and March. So the sales in January was given as nothing. The sales in February was 90,000, and the sales in March was given, I beg your pardon, it was 80,000 in February, and it was 90,000 in March. So for January, obviously we're not going to have any collections because there was nothing. Then in February we have 80,000, so we're going to start in February with the debtor collection, and they say that 20% of the debtors, 20% of the debtors qualify for a discount of 5% because they pay in the current month. So if we're in February, 20% of people will pay in the current month, and then they get a discount of 5%, which leaves us with a factor of 95%. In March, we will be able to collect 50%, so it will be 80,000 times 50%, and then these payments will not be able to obtain discount. So for March, it's going to be 90,000 times 20% times a factor of 95%, and that gives us 17,100. So if I now get to the sum of my sales, I will have a collection of 15,200 in February and 5,700 in March. So January, there's nothing. So I'm going to go to receipts and I'm going to say debtor payments. Obviously, I have left too many rows, rather safe than sorry, but we can delete them now. So there's no debtors who pay. You can also alternatively actually call a debtor collection. From our point of view, it is a collection. From their point of view, it's a payment. So for the debtor collection, it was nothing for January. It was 15,200 for February, and it was 57,100 in March. Right, the final note says that we need to maintain a balance of 10,000 Rand in the bank account at all times. So that's the last thing that we then need to go and check for to see if we need to make a loan. So we're going to first see, but what is then the sum of the payment in January? So I'm adding up all my payments. And then, of course, the receipts were nothing. My closing cash balance, and I call this my pencil balance, will then be the 80 plus 0 receipts minus payments of 76,000. That gives us a cash balance of only 4,000. And we need a balance of 10,000. So under the receipts, I'm going to have to take out a loan, and the loan will have to be 6,000 in order to get us to the 10,000 balance. So my receipts will then change to 6,000, and then obviously my cash balance will go to 10,000. All right, I need to calculate some interest. So I've taken a loan of 6,000. So in February, I need to pay interest on the loan. And that will be then for the next month, because interest is, of course, in arrears. So we'll say it's the 6,000 loan, and the first interest is based on a 10% return, and it was for 1 month. So that's 1 divided by 12. So that gives us interest on the loan of 50 Rand. Again, I'm going to get to my pencil total. So I first test what the closing balance currently is before I calculate my loan. It would seem to me that my closing balance becomes my opening balance. My receipts, I'll just highlight them. Bold is 15,200. And then I'm just going to get the sum of all my payments. And that was 25,320. So if I test my amount, I have 10,000 plus receipts minus my payment sum total. And that leaves me with minus 160 Rand in my bank account. So that is a bit of a problem. So I need to go and figure out, but what will be the loan to get to 10,000? So if I look at my current situation, this can be, let's say, your timeline, and let's suppose that right there in the middle, you have your 0.0. So this is the point where you have no money. Currently, you are in the red by 160 Rand. So I'm going to say 160 Rand. And what you need is to go to 10,000 Rand. So the argument is that you will, to get to having no money, you will short 160 Rand. And then to get from 0 to 10,000, you will need another 10,000. So that means you will have to take out a loan of 10,000 rand and 100 plus the 160. So that's going to be 10,160 loan that you need there. So then your receipts will of course change, and you will have the 10,000 that you need. Then there's 10,000 opening balance, and we again need to now calculate the interest on the loans. So we first had 6,000. So there's 6,000 rand now that we've had a 10,000 rand interest on for another month because the previous month was calculated, and we have an additional loan of 10,160, and that is also 10% at 1 out of 12. So if I do the calculations, that will again add up to 50 rand, of course. And if I calculate the interest on the 10,160 times the return times the months, I get interest rounded of 84.7. So the sum of the two interests is 134.67, and on the memorandum it was then rounded to a full rand of 135 rand interest. We're going to get to the sum of all our payments, and then we also need to indicate our receipts. And the final balance, the opening balance plus the receipts minus the payments, gives us a balance of 21,615. And it means that in March, we will not be required to make a loan to get to the minimum of 10,000 rand in our bank accounts. All right, so then the final question was that you had to go and calculate what the outstanding loan was. And that was quite simple. The only thing that you would have done is to add the two together. So in required 1.2, you would have simply said that we had a loan in January and we had a loan in February, and the loan in January was 6,000, the loan in February was 10,160, and the sum of those two is then your final answer, which is 16,160. So that is our loan total, and that should have been then your answer in required 1.2. Pretty straightforward. All right, so thank you for watching this video. I think this cash budget was very interesting. It was asked in a very interesting way because you had to go and do certain calculations that actually relate to your operational budget, which made it quite interesting. But I don't think it was totally undoable. If you watch this video and you go through the calculations and you understand the calculations, it's actually simple to get to the answers. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that this has helped to shed some light on the group assignment that some students said they found very, very difficult. If you have any other questions, please stop by my office and I will be glad to answer any additional things that you might be struggling with. Until then, I hope that you have a great day.